I was not expecting to talk about these again, but here we are. I found more moves after the second video released, like literally 3 hours after it released, and it wasn't even until recently until I wanted to start talking about them again. And there is a lot I missed, so for shits and giggles, we might as well cover every single one. Ones I've covered before, and even Mechless Eggman's moves. So, let's get into it. But first, we're gonna categorize them in 7 different categories: defense, stepping and dashes, grabs, animations, projectiles, melee moves, and some unknown moves. To showcase these moves in a simple manner, without things getting into the way, I made a custom stage that will show these in a more easier manner. You might recognize this stage from the Mechless Eggman video, which is why it's going to be reused here. I will also be going over certain moves differently. I will also include the damage value, if they deal damage, and the hex value too, so if you want to try out these moves for yourself, you can just copy and paste the hex values into the video over another move. So, let's get started. These are just leftovers from fighting vipers, but it's interesting that these animations actually display the barrier and actually function properly. This one's just an unused barrier animation, nothing really too special. These two are interesting, as originally it seemed the developers planned for you to be able to block when crouching. However, it was cut, as barriers block all types of moves, low, mediums, and high, by default. So a crouch block would be basically useless. And this one's just an unused animation for the barrier being hit when it's active. Nothing too special for the barriers, honestly. It seems like defense dashing was planned, however, they're just animations, so unfortunately we can't really see their full potential, but I imagine they really didn't work out well for this game. The movement is quite different than her movement in the final game. Most likely her movement was originally meant to be slower. Now, I would talk about these in depth, but honestly, I don't see a difference. They're most likely just duplicates, but hey, if anyone can tell the difference, please let me know, because I literally can't tell with this one. If you've seen my Mechless Eggman video, you will know that these went unused for a good reason, as it would give him worse movement, even though he has the worst movement in the game. It should make sense why those got the axe. These walking and skip animations seems like they would be fit for this idle animation seen in this screenshot here. Nothing else really to be said here. A lot more interesting, but I'm hoping Grabs has a lot more in store. The only difference is that these don't have their own cutscene camera like other Grabs, and these are most likely modeled after the beta camera, and they're also slower. This one should ring some bells. This one is the most overpowered Grab in the entire game, and you cannot convince me otherwise. This was originally meant for Fang and SPO, and I'm just thankful they don't have this. It does 50 damage. Doesn't seem bad, but when you realize the normal amount of health is 140, it doesn't start to look that good. It also is the only Grab that allows you the true combo into Horse Kick, and doing that combo twice kills your opponent. Thank God this was cut, otherwise Metal Sonic would have competition. This is an unused version of Amy's Grab. It deals more damage, and it seems like Amy was originally going to be able to grab from behind at one point, but I guess it was cut for a variety of reasons. An unused version of Foot Crush. It's much different, and it does a lot of damage, and can combo into Hot Punch. Not really ideal, but it can still deal some crazy numbers if you play your cards right. As you can tell, the Model 2 developers are really great at naming moves. They obviously have a great track record when it comes to that, but it's one of the most infamous moves. This one goes to an unused character, and this is where the Heart Eyes models are used. However, they don't activate correctly, and there's also grayscale versions of these. A Fighting Vipers carryover. And it's actually interesting how many Fighting Viper stuff was left over. I know this game was built off the game, but like there's so much things left over. You'd figure they'd remove this stuff by the time the game came out. This was a reference to Fighting Vipers, where Honey would occasionally do this animation. It goes unused in this game though. Most likely a different animation when Sonic gets out of air spin, but that's just my guess. These are unused victory animations meant for Sonic and Bark. They don't look that good honestly, but it's pretty cool. And yes, these were the victory animations I tricked the Xbox community thinking it was a secret win animation. Sorry for the 5 people that actually want Bark and Sonic to do aura farming, but you know, I guess it's just not a thing you can do in this game. This one's an unused losing animation for Amy. This one is labeled as Drow in the code for some reason. Maybe this animation was intended for when a player ties, implying every other character was going to have an animation like this too. These were cut specifically on how rare it is to even get a tie in this game. From what I know, there's only 2 situations on where you can even get a tie in a game, and these are already rare enough, so I'm pretty sure it's understandable why these were cut. There's a duplicate of the normal quirk. This one was most likely unused to help the developers figure out where the projectiles are in the move data. Next we have this flying hand projectile. It's unknown who would have had this, but my guess it would have been Amy. It lasts a very long time and it's very overpowered. It only hits once, but when you spawn multiple, it can be quite chaotic. You have this heart projectile that also most likely would have belonged to Amy or Honey. This projectile is unique, as it tracks, and it's also the only projectile to not take effect on certain characters. Next we have this floating bomb. I have no clue what this would have been used for. I'm thinking Bean would have been able to plant bombs into the ground, kind of like trip mines, but honestly, I have no clue. Here's an unused version of Bean's bomb kick. It's very fast and for some reason it can track. Then you have a large number of invisible quirks, whose shadows kinda get off-center. These are most likely leftover of green Eggman's rockets, and the more you go, the more the shadows are positioned wrong. Well, I have some good news so far. We're almost done with every single unused move. But there's 2 we haven't figured out yet. Melee moves and unknown moves. These will probably take up the largest section of the video. So, strap in. This one's going to be a long one. Most known for when Tails' automatic mode is an unused version of Tails' forward glide. The Tails models don't update, so it's just as normal models, but they can be easily fixed. I'm assuming it was planned to where, maybe when Tails is doing glide, you'd have the option to just do, a forward glide, rather than just being able to press any button to change direction at any time. Another Espio move. It's fitting that it's also really good. And slightly broken. It can stop moves like glide, if you can hit it at the right time, as it can struggle sometimes. But it can't stop air moves like Emerald Dive, for example. And its last hit doesn't have a hitbox. We can fix this by extending the time it's active for, but it was most likely cut by how clunky the move is. I mean, it's a hard knockdown move that rotates 3 times, which you'd figure would be a multi-hitting move. A unused get-up animation. This may have been a universal thing, but it's a bit unclear. If you go into the characters' animation tables, some have these animations in their animation tables, but from what I've tested, they literally never show up, so that's interesting. Skip Punch was also going to be there with skip kicks, however it was cut, mainly because of how bad the move is. It's not really that practical to use without Hyper, and its only really good use is with Hyper. Mainly with Eggman, because if you activate Hyper, use Skip Punch with him, and spam Drill Claw, it can be a pretty good effective move. However, it can whiff on most characters, and because it's a high move, it can be ducked. backwards versions of Sonic and SBO Spin Dash. It was planned but most likely cut because these really don't really have a good use, honestly. Sure, it can work sometimes, however it never comes into play. Something interesting is that SBO's Spin Dash for some reason does 3 less damage than Sonic's. I'm not sure if this is a thing in the base game, but it's still pretty interesting. Yes, I know some people will say, oh, this move is used. Well, they are right, however, this version of the move isn't. You can see the difference because this one has no trail. I assume this could have been its own move that you could activate at any point. However, the developers couldn't figure out an input for it, so it was cut. I'm pretty sure it's better they just left it as an additional thing you could do with Volley Toss. This is a Spin Dash carryover from Sonic. The version where he interrupts Spiral Spin. Maybe Tails was also going to have Spiral Spin as well. It's slow, and it's a very early version of Submarine Snipe, and it was used in the AOU show build, which I think deserved its own video in its own right, but I'll get to that eventually. This move is just not that good, and also if you're wondering what projectile it uses just uses the normal cork. This was a version of Bark's Scissor Punch that's a low move instead of a high move. They went with Sit Punch instead, and that's stupid because Bark's Sit Punch has a missing hitbox on one of his arms, and it's one of the worst moves in the game. I'm sorry, Bark mains. Sonic kinda had this in Fighting Vipers, but it was most likely meant for Bark. It's very slow and is quite strong, and it actually has a unique property. Depending if the player is doing a move, the state the player will have when they get hit is kinda unique. If they aren't doing a move, they get that, and if they are doing a move, it's a hard knockdown. Pretty unique, and I wish other moves did this too. Now, these moves, from what I know, have an unknown purpose, but my main guess is for when Sonic does a Spin Dash, he might have been able to jump out of a Spin Dash too, in the same way that he was originally going to be able to Spin Dash backwards too. And if this was in the final game, he would be broken. To put that in comparison, if this and the backward Spin Dash were in the game, these are the possible angles Sonic can jump in. Probably not good, and it's probably a good reason why these were cut. Or maybe these could have been a version like those air jump backflip kicks from like Virtua Fighter or something. Honestly, I have no clue. This is a version of the second skip kick that does a twirl instead. In the second video, I said that the first kick does no damage. But what I didn't know is that these moves, like the kick after Skip Punch, for example, they copy keyframes from the other moves so they can fit nicely into transitions. So I'm sorry about that. So yeah, apparently the first kick isn't meant to connect, and the first kick is just meant for, well, the first part of the move. And the first kick in this move isn't meant to be, you know, a normal kick. Most likely for Tails, as it's considered a fly move, and it has the same hit effect as Scissor Punch. Not sure why it was cut though. I mean, the move is pretty weird, and it's kinda inconsistent, but I'm pretty sure that's just because of the character I was fighting with. This is the beta Sonic Spin Dash meant for a sidestep Spin Dash, and it has more end lag. That's really about it. meant for Sonic and Tails, but it looks horrible. But again, this was made at a time where the developers were unsure how the game would have played like, so that's why this move's kinda in a weird state. This hyper start is interesting. It's very slow, can't easily be interrupted, and has a weird hard knockdown instead of being a fast, quick tool like normal hyper start is. This was most likely meant for arcade mode, as there's this leftover thing where it can replace the intro animation with this move. I'm assuming if a second player went into arcade mode while you were playing it, it would give them this hyper mode state when they got in, so they could play as that character. However, it's kinda unknown what this move was really for, considering it's the only move in the game that actually has a knockback status that also does no damage. This is Mechless Eggman's third jab. Or is it? This move originally belonged to Tails, believe it or not, as Mechless Eggman was built off Beta Tails. So that's kinda cool. We know this from the AOU show 1996 footage where we can see Tails doing this move. However, unfortunately this dude's in the way, so it's kinda hard to get a real clear picture of this. So it's gonna look like a Game & Watch game, so I'm sorry about that. It also doesn't break barriers, which is kinda weird. These projectiles right here are even worse than hammer throw, believe it or not. And these are also glitched. They don't hit opponents when they're down. While their damage is pretty good, doing 60 in total, the trajectory in which they're thrown in isn't good. When you throw the first bomb, it gets sent to Mars. You throw the second bomb, it goes to the player. And you throw the third one, it goes to Antarctica. Like, there's no way you're hitting any of these. Okay, maybe the second one, but the other two? Impossible. This is a dive move for Sonic and Tails. The one from Finding Vipers, obviously, which is kind of unique here. Though its damage is alright for a dive move, there's one big drawback to this. One huge drawback to this. Now, if you land it, good for you. You get to get out very quickly. However, if you whiff, well, I'll just let you take a guess. If you're using the live chat premiere right now, I want you to throw some numbers. And if you're not, after this video's up, I guess just think of the value in your head. I'll give you a few seconds. Alright, so no, it's not 30. No, it's not 60. And no, it's not even 90 either. If you guessed the number 160, you're correct. Your reward is absolutely nothing. Now, I know this move was designed for another game, but 160 frames? That's ridiculous for any move like this. Even wind-up punch and golf swing, moves that are intentionally meant to be slow, somehow manage to be better than this move. And it also doesn't help that you can't even escape from this move early, even by just spamming the kick button. Good luck, you can't even do it. By the time you whiff this move, the other player had a cup of coffee, made dinner, played every single video game in existence, and watched the Godfather trilogy 85 times. So odds are, if you whiff this move, your grave has been there since like the 1940s. You're These are interesting. These are Bark's barrier punch and barrier walk moves. You might be saying that these aren't unused, but these ones are. It seems like when Bark runs out of barriers, you were originally meant to still be able to use those moves. However, they still aren't good though. Barrier Walk is kinda similar to the unused defense dashes, but hey, at least it moves you forward quicker and allows you to die 10 seconds faster. And Barrier Punch seems identical, except it doesn't protect you, kinda defeating the whole point of the move in the first place. But hey, maybe it might be pretty good for him. These moves are somewhat in Fighter's Mega Mix, however, the barrier just isn't there, and I'm assuming it just works like a normal block in that game. So, it's still pretty cool nonetheless. Now, these last 3 moves are ones I'm really not sure what they could have been used for. They mainly belong in the animation or stepping and dashes category, but I figured I'd put them here since I'm not really sure what they could have been used for. It seems like these could have been for like a character's walk, dash, and pre-crouch, but they also had the label Domi. I'm hoping I'm saying this name right. Hopefully, or possibly, these animations were meant for an unused character. Honestly, I have no idea who this could have belonged to, but hey, at least there's people online that can possibly guess this for me. And that right there is every single unused move in Sonic the Fighters. Now, let's get all the things in total. If you include projectiles and Mechless Eggman's moves, and the other sub-variants of moves, you get a total of 112 unused moves. 112. For reference, there's 518 moves in total, so that means with this number, around 20% of the moves in this game go unused. That's crazy. But if we remove the Mechless Eggman stuff that is actually used, that now becomes 18%, meaning our total is now 97. But that's still a lot. However, that's if you include the sub-variants of moves. If we don't count those and we just consider grabs as just one whole move, our final number and our total number is 90. If you really want to, count that. But I'd say 112 is the correct number. Or, well, 90 if you really think about it. This video was so hard to make. This is possibly the longest script I've ever wrote to date, at least if right now. I hope y'all enjoyed this absolutely massive video. It took me a while to finish it, because most of it was to gather research. Yes, I checked all 518 moves individually. Multiple times, in fact. So you can imagine how time-consuming that can be. I also sent a copy to all these moves and their hex values to some of the developers of Sonic the Fighters Community Edition, and it is also in the data mining tab in the Sonic the Fighters Discord server. I'll also be sending it in my Discord server too. I'd like to thank them for making certain moves easier to showcase, and I'd also like to thank them for making the move data spreadsheet and Mystic Noodle for that one unlisted video in the Sonic the Fighters Discord. This video wouldn't exist without them, and because of their work, hopefully these moves will have their time in the spotlight. But for now, I think the better solution is just to let them rest. Anyways, thank you for watching, and hopefully, I will never have to talk about unused moves again in a format like this. Anyways, see y'all next time.